Have you ever heard the legend of the Black Hollow Forest? Probably not, unless you're obsessed with the darkest corners of the internet, where horror fans whisper about places that don't make it onto tourist maps. Welcome back to Scary Moo, where I bring you the kind of stories that make you reconsider even looking out your window at night. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about the night I spent alone in what's been called the most cursed forest on Earth. And believe me, everything you've heard about cursed forests is nothing compared to what I experienced in Black Hollow. When I first started researching this forest, I thought the stories were just urban legends. People vanish in there, they said. Sometimes the forest spits them back out, blank-eyed and never the same again. Sometimes, it keeps them. I thought, sure, every old forest has its ghost stories. But as I dug deeper, I realized something was different about this place. The disappearances weren't just rumors, they were documented. Over the past 50 years, more than 30 people have gone missing within a 3-square-mile stretch of Black Hollow, and only a handful have ever been found. None of them could explain what happened. The ones who could speak at all, that is. But what really got me was the curse. According to local legend, a coven of witches was burned alive in Black Hollow centuries ago. They say their screams still echo under the canopy, and their dying curse poisoned the land forever. Even the animals avoid the forest's heart. When you step inside, you're not just entering a patch of trees. You're stepping into a wound that never healed. I arrived at the edge of Black Hollow just before sunset. The boundary is obvious. The trees suddenly grow taller, packed so tightly together that daylight barely penetrates the leaves. The ground is choked with roots, and the air smells wrong, like iron and rotting leaves, even in the spring. Locals refuse to enter after dusk. In fact, they warned me not to go at all. You might walk in with your own mind, one old man told me, but you'll leave with something else whispering in your head. If you leave at all. My plan was simple. Spend the night in the forest's heart, where the curse is said to be strongest. No phone, no GPS. Nothing that could offend the spirits, as the locals put it. Just a flashlight, a notebook, and a digital recorder. I promised myself I wouldn't leave the circle I'd drawn in the dirt until sunrise. It sounds cliché, but the deeper I walked, the more the world seemed to change around me. The birds stopped singing first. The insects went silent next. Soon, all I could hear was my own heartbeat and the crunch of dead leaves under my boots. The forest closed in, each tree trunk twisted into grotesque shapes. Some looked like people with their arms raised in agony, their bark faces twisted in silent screams. I forced myself not to look too closely. By the time total darkness fell, I'd reached the heart of the forest. There's a clearing there, a perfect circle, as if something massive once landed there and scorched everything away. The ground inside the circle is black, the soil thick and greasy. Nothing grows in that spot, not even moss. The stories say this is where the witches died, bound and burned alive as punishment for their unnatural ways. They say the flames ate their bodies, but their hate seeped into the earth. I sat in the center of the circle, feeling exposed and watched. The trees pressed in, their branches clawing at the sky. Every so often, I thought I saw movement at the edge of the clearing, shadows that flickered and dissolved when I tried to focus on them. I started recording my thoughts, trying to sound brave. My voice echoed strangely, too loud in the silence. The air grew colder, far too quickly for a spring night. My breath fogged in front of me, and I could see it hanging in the air longer than it should have. That's when the whispers started. Faint at first, just on the edge of hearing. I thought they were the wind, until I realized there was no wind, no sound at all, except the low, urgent hissing that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Leave, this is not your place. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that the stories had gotten under my skin. But the whispers grew louder, until I could almost make out words. Some in English, some in a guttural language I'd never heard before. I wrote in my notebook, trying to keep my hands from shaking. I asked if anyone, or anything, was there with me. The answer was instant. A sharp, icy wind slammed into me, even though the air had been deathly still moments before. It carried the smell of burning hair and charred flesh. I gagged. The whispers became screams, overlapping and shrill, rising to a fever pitch before suddenly cutting off. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I looked up, and that's when I saw them. Figures, just beyond the circle, half-glimpsed shapes, tall and thin, with faces hidden by tangled hair. Their eyes glowed a sick, unnatural yellow. They didn't move like people. Their joints bent the wrong way, and their limbs seemed to stretch and contract with every flicker of my flashlight. I squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to believe what I was seeing. But when I opened them, the figures were closer. Not walking, gliding, as if the ground offered them no resistance. I remembered what the locals said about the witch's curse. If you see them, don't speak. Don't answer. Don't even look at them too long, or they'll know you see. I stared at the ground, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would burst. Then, a voice, clear, female and impossibly sad, spoke right behind me. "Why are you here?" I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. The voice was achingly human, but threaded with something ancient and cruel. It was as if 1,000 voices spoke through that one mouth. I whispered that I meant no harm, that I just wanted to understand what happened here. The voice laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "Understand? You cannot understand. You are prey. You are trespasser. You are offering." The ground beneath me pulsed, as if something massive shifted just below the surface. My skin crawled with cold that went bone deep. One of the figures stepped into the clearing, and I saw her face, a mask of burned flesh, hollow eyes leaking black tears. She opened her mouth, and ashes poured out, swirling around me, filling my nose and mouth. I choked, falling to my knees. The world spun. I started to lose time. My notebook entries became frantic, scrawled nonsense. I wrote the same word over and over, hungry. I clawed at the dirt, desperate to hold on to myself. The whispers inside my head grew louder, telling me to walk into the trees, to join them. I bit my tongue hard enough to draw blood, trying to stay awake, to remember who I was. The night stretched on, endless and cold. There was no moon, no stars, just the oppressive darkness, and the feeling of being watched from every direction. Sometimes, I heard footsteps behind me. Sometimes, hot breath on my neck. Once, a hand, ice-cold and impossibly long-fingered, closed around my wrist and tried to drag me into the trees. I screamed and tore free, falling back into the circle. I started to realize the circle itself was my only protection. The soil inside it was dead, but nothing crossed its boundary. The figures stalked around the edge, pacing in silence. They watched me with those burning eyes, whispering to each other in voices too ancient to understand. I remembered the legend. The witch's curse poisoned the land, but also trapped them inside. As long as I stayed in the circle, I was safe. Or at least, safer than I would be outside. But the forest wanted me to leave the circle, to step into its embrace. The voices promised me warmth, knowledge, power, anything I wanted, if I just crossed that line. I saw visions in the darkness. Loved ones calling to me, faces twisted with desperation. I knew they weren't real, but the urge to follow them was almost overwhelming. The forest uses your own mind against you. It finds your weaknesses, your fears, your secret desires, and twists them until you can't tell what's real anymore. At some point, I must have fallen asleep or lost consciousness. I dreamed of fire, of screaming women bound to stakes, their eyes burning with fury and grief. They called out to me by name, asking why I watched and did nothing. When I tried to answer, my mouth filled with ash. I woke to the first pale light of dawn. The figures were gone, but their footprints, black and charred, surrounded the circle. My hands were covered in dirt and blood. My throat was raw from screaming. I stumbled out of the clearing, feeling eyes on me the whole way. The forest seemed to shift behind me, closing ranks as if erasing all evidence of my presence. When I finally broke through the tree line, the sun was rising. I collapsed, gasping for air that didn't reek of death and rot. I looked back once, just once, and thought I saw a face in the shadows, watching, waiting. It's been weeks since that night, but I still hear the whispers sometimes, especially when I'm alone or in the dark. The curse of Black Hollow doesn't let go so easily. They say once you've been marked by the forest, it follows you. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes in waking hours. I'm not sure if I brought something back with me, or if I just left a piece of myself behind. So, what did I learn from surviving a night alone in the most cursed forest on earth? Some places are haunted not by ghosts, but by hate so deep it poisons the ground forever. Some wounds never heal, and sometimes when you go looking for answers in the dark answers back. If you ever find yourself near Black Hollow, do yourself a favor, stay away, no matter how curious you are. There are places where the veil is too thin, where the dead are too hungry, and where the living are nothing more than prey. If you made it this far, congratulations. You're braver than most. Or maybe just more reckless. Either way, you've been warned. If you want more true stories from the edge of horror, make sure to subscribe to Scary Moo. And whatever you do, never answer when the forest whispers your name.